Hi class, welcome back to week number 3. I hope you are enjoying the movies so far. It's my hope that this class is enjoyable for you. If you have any questions or concerns, however, please email me as soon as possible. If you need to, you can include your phone number. I'll call you. But I do want to make sure that this class is enjoyable. Sometimes it's challenging. Being online, we don't get to see each other. We don't get to talk. We don't get to have that nice interaction. And as a teacher, I enjoy that. But sometimes the way things work out, it's better to have an online class. It's more accessible for you. And for me right now, it actually works out really well too. I can be in the comfort of my own home and talk with you. So like I said, if you have any questions, though, please email me, contact me as soon as possible. Okay, moving on. We're looking at culture this week, culture in cinema. There's many aspects we can look at cinema, and if you've already looked at the syllabus, you can see in the next coming weeks we're going to be looking at style and lighting and editing and cinematography, all these wonderful aspects of cinema. But one thing we can't overlook is culture. Movies definitely reflect their culture. They are products of their era. If you will, they're an artifact from their time, kind of like a time capsule plucked out from its era and plopped right down here in good old 2010 for us to enjoy and to dissect. Now, it doesn't mean that they're pure. It's not like we were able to go back and actually take a core sample of 1936 and bring it here and look at it and examine it and say, oh, okay, here we go. This is pure 1936. No, it doesn't work that way, particularly when it comes to cinema. Because if you haven't already noticed, we can manipulate images. We can manipulate people's emotions. We can manipulate history, particularly if you look at the birth of a nation. So cinema and movies are very manipulative. Directors definitely have agendas and they have points of view that they're trying to convey to their audience. So we do need to be aware of that. I think a true historian understands this, and so they can look at cinema, and then they can also go and look at some primary sources, some writings and letters back and forth between different people. They can look at the newspapers of the era. They can look at radio. They can look at other sorts of writings and get a better overall idea of what that era was and what types of cultures existed within that time frame. But for all purposes necessary, tonight and this week as you watch this movie and reflect upon it, well, we can kind of teleport, if you will, back to 1936 and kind of experience it a little bit here. Now, when we're talking about culture, I want to define this a little bit for us. Culture, it is a little bit more than just like, oh, high culture, well, that's the symphony, and low culture, well, that's rock music, or sometimes we refer to culture in that regards. But culture really is talking about a learned set. I'm going off a definition here. A learned set of shared interpretations or shared assumptions, shared beliefs, values, norms, social practices. This is a very broad definition of it, and it's shared in common with a certain group of people. Now, sometimes this could be a particular ethnicity, maybe a race, maybe even a nationality, but nonetheless, it is some sort of grouping of humanity, and there's a common shared understanding between one another, and a lot of this is very symbolic. If we have it in common and we use these symbols, we don't have to explain anything. We understand where these people are coming from. In many ways, language is kind of a shared symbolic representation. When I say the word car, a car doesn't come out of my mouth so people know what I'm talking about. That word represents, it's a symbolic a gesture coming from my vocal cords so that when I say it, there's an image that pops in your mind. Now, for some of you, it was an Audi. For others, it was a Honda, like me, like I drive. But nonetheless, we get the essence of a four-wheeled vehicle that would drive us from point A to point B. We can define that a little bit later down the road if we needed to. But nonetheless, within culture, we have these kind of shared assumptions. Now, within a mighty large nation like the United States, there are many different subcultures, there are many different ethnicities and races and so forth. So as a pluralistic nation, how do we have things that bind us together? Well, a lot of this is just kind of a national consciousness that is really reflective, if you will, by looking even at our Constitution. The idea that we, the people, have established a government to govern our own affairs. And within that, we've given ourselves the Bill of Rights and other sorts of constitutional rights. Even the Declaration of Independence says we have certain inalienable rights. And so we, I think, have a shared understanding, whether it's perfectly instituted or not. There's a general idea that there is equality amongst people and that there are certain rights that we can't violate in that regard. And so in some ways you could maybe say this is kind of a shared assumption amongst a nationalistic mindset. So a Californian, somebody from New York, somebody from Tennessee, they would all at least have this kind of idea that links us together in that regard. So, and a culture then would be those artifacts that are produced out of those shared understandings, the things that we talk about, the things that we value, the things that we appreciate. And so it's ideas, it's also physical things that we create, and so forth. So when we're looking at a movie, it really is a nice vehicle to talk about culture and to talk about how we have changed from one era to the next. I noticed that a couple of you discussed the race issue in regard to some of these early films. Where were African Americans in these early movies? And you know, it's a pretty fair question. They weren't in these early movies. Now, by Birth of a Nation, you might have showed there were a few African Americans in that movie, but nonetheless, it really wasn't a great movie to be a part of in that regards. But nonetheless, we could actually look at movies through different lenses and see how we have developed as a country. So in the early part of the 20th century, you had hardly any African Americans reflected in the movies. If you did, they were a very, very stereotypical reflection of who they are. And then you could move forward 50 years into the 1950s and see Sidney Poitier and oh my goodness, why am I blanking out? Blackboard Jungle, where he is a teacher teaching a very rough area, and how he deals with that and deals with these kind of racial questions. And it kind of reflects a nation beginning to ask itself, how are we going to deal with these civil rights? How are we going to deal with the integration of white and black? So there you go. That movie reflects its time and moves forward. The kind of a social discussion, if you will. So nonetheless, that's how movies can kind of reflect where we're going and who we are and what we value at the time that the movies are made. Now, like I said, it's not always perfect. And sometimes movies are manipulative. They have different agendas, different points of view. But in a second part here, I'm going to come back and just talk real briefly about Charlie Chaplin, and then we'll wrap that up so you can watch the movie. All right.